Welcome to Powerful Women Rising, a podcast for female entrepreneurs ready to do business their way. Grab your coffee and join host Melissa Snow, business relationship strategist and founder of the Powerful Women Rising community, as she interviews industry experts and shares insights on strategy, marketing, mindset, and more. Here, you'll find the tools, strategies, and inspiration you need to feel empowered, take bold action in your business, and keep rising.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Powerful Women Rising podcast. I am your host, Melissa Snow, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. I don't know what the weather or the season is in your part of the world, but here it is summer, finally. We love summer, love the sunshine. But it's also funny because I spend all winter complaining about how it's so cold and I can't wait for spring. And then I spend all summer complaining how it's too hot and how I can't wait for fall. So if you live somewhere where there are no seasons other than like spring and fall, let me know because that's where I need to live. Anyway, here I am coming to you live and sweaty from the summer. If we have never met before, this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. As I said, my name's Melissa. I'm the founder of Powerful Women Rising, and I run an online community for female entrepreneurs called the Powerful Women Rising Community. And I call myself a business relationship strategist, which basically means I teach female entrepreneurs how to grow their business by being themselves and by creating real, genuine connections with people. So I am thrilled to share today's episode with you because this interview has been a long time coming. I first found Matthew Pollard when I read his book, The Introverts' Edge to Networking. And that book really was a game changer for me and has informed so much of my current business. I found the book when I was still working as a dating and relationship coach. And what really changed things for me was just this very simple idea that you can build your business the way that you want to build it. You can network in a way that feels good and comfortable for you. You can market, you can do sales, you can do social media or not do social media in the way that you want to. And I know it sounds really simple, but I think we've all been there, especially in the beginning of business, when we get into business because we want to do our thing, but we don't actually know much about growing or running a business. So we look to the quote unquote experts, right? To tell us how to do things. Or we look at what seems to be working for everyone else and we just do what seems to be working for them because obviously that's what works. And getting to the point where you learn and realize that you can do it your way and that it is actually going to work, that you're actually probably going to be more successful and it's going to be simpler doing it your way than trying to force yourself to do it someone else's way is a total game changer. And that is why I teach people how to network like a human and not like a salesy weirdo, because that's really what that means is be yourself, create connections the way that you want to create connections. And that's what we're all about in the Powerful Women Rising community as well, showing up with authenticity, with integrity, sharing our celebrations, sharing our struggles, supporting each other through genuine connections and authentic relationships, because that really is the power of sustainable business growth. So if you know me or you've been following me for a while, you know every once in a while I get this wild hair and I decide to start reaching out to people on Instagram and inviting them to be on my podcast. And sometimes these are like super, super famous people like Jennifer Lopez. And I'm always kind of surprised when they don't respond. And I don't know why, because Jennifer has taught me to be very used to not getting a response. Thanks, Jennifer. But this guest today, Matthew Pollard, is one of those people that I reached out to, and for a long time I didn't get a response, and that was fine. But then all of a sudden I did get a message from him, and he said that he would love to be on the podcast. He connected me with his assistant, and the rest was history. So I am very excited to share this interview with you. I probably could have talked to him for another 3 hours, but I kept it to the juicy gems. So let me introduce you to Matthew Pollard if you're not familiar with him or you've never read his books. He is known as the rapid growth guy, and he's responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories, all before the age of 30. He comes from humble beginnings and faced a lot of adversities and had an epic rise to success that shows that anyone with the right motivation and the right strategies can achieve anything that they set their mind to. Today, Forbes calls Matthew the real deal. Global gurus list him as a top 30 sales professional. Selling Power magazine named him as their 2023 Sales Kickoff Speaker of the Year. Sales World magazine lists him as a top 50 speaker, and Big Speak highlights him as an international top 10 sales trainer. He's also the founder of introvertyou.com and the best-selling author of the Introverts Edge book series, which has sold over 100,000 copies and been translated into 15 languages. Get ready to be inspired to show up as yourself in your business, to find your way to do things, and to learn to love networking, yes, even if you are an introvert. This is my interview with Matthew Pollard. Hello, Matthew, and welcome to the Powerful Women Rising podcast.
So I'm ecstatic to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. It's funny, I was just looking through, I just discovered on Instagram that there's an archive where you can see all your old stories. I just discovered this last night after many years on Instagram. And I was looking at some of my old stories and I saw one that I had screenshotted that was a DM that I'd sent to you and a DM that I'd sent to Joe Polish. And I put something on there about like, not me over here surprised that neither of these icons have responded to my DM. And I was like, wow, how things have changed, because you did respond and you agreed to come on the podcast. And I was so excited. So thank you for being here.
My absolute pleasure. And you know what's interesting? I used to personally respond to every message. The trouble is, I guess, and I feel like I still do my best to respond to everyone I can. But, you know, with my book selling over 100,000 copies, I get messages from so many places, which is amazing to see. I try to never get into the negative hype or the positive hype. But the fact is that there are so many introverts now that don't see themselves as second-class citizens. And I'm on it every day, especially for a person. We were talking just before this about how, you know, I never should have written these books. With my reading speed issues and things like that. And to see how much of an impact it's made on people's lives, I'm just really pleased. And for those people that read my book and send me comments, I do my best to respond to every one of you, but please know I'm so grateful to get them every time that I do get them. So thank you very much for those that have already sent them.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who are not familiar with you, although if they're listening to this podcast, they probably are because they've heard me talk about your book many times. Tell everybody just a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I was honored to hear that my work had such an impact on you before the show. So that, you know, that amazing. For me, I spend my life helping introverts realize they're not second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different to that of an extrovert. And if they try to become an extrovert, that's actually a really uncomfortable thing to do because you'll feel transactional, you'll go home and you'll ruminate if you're doing things like networking. And for me, what I've found is that introverts have our own strengths. When we learn to embrace those, we really can have the edge in sales, in networking, in public speaking, in running our own businesses. And truthfully, what I find, and I love seeing this, I love seeing an entrepreneur, specifically a service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find more often than not is they get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, feeling like people only care about one thing, price. And I think we were talking about this as well before we went on. By the way, two introverts planning and preparing what they were going to talk to on a podcast. What a surprise. But, you know, so many people will then say, oh, I'm just going to put on a funnel. I'm just going to do this. And none of these things work or they get really expensive. And it ends up making people feel like they've got to take a photo of their dog or their donut just to have something to say on Instagram. And the truth is, I guess that's right. If you want to focus on being the loudest, I focus on helping people become the clearest because my mission is really to help these people realize they really can have a rapid growth business doing what they love, just not by getting better at their functional skill, because they're probably amazing at that, and not by focusing on all these tactics, because if you don't know how to articulate what you do when somebody's politely listening to you in a networking room in a way that somebody leans forward and goes, oh my gosh, I need that, or tell me more, you've got no business being online. And even when you are ready to move online, you just have to understand that the average person, if you can't do it face-to-face, you're definitely not going to be able to do it online. And that's why you see so many people teaching you all these methods that become full-time jobs. So I think for my background, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in more detail, but I went from a reading speed of a sixth grader, not knowing what I wanted to do in my life, to being responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories. And when I moved to the United States, I made the decision that I wanted to really dedicate my life to helping other introverts realize that they really could, but they need to focus a little bit of their time on authentically articulating what it is that they do in a way that is much more systematic and process driven, just like any other part of their business, which truthfully, if you're an extrovert listening, I mean, if you ever want to sell your business, if you're the primary salesperson, your business is not sellable. So even you should be considering creating a system. But for us introverts, we absolutely need it, because without that, well, we're kind of terrible at those, I'm going to say, so-called extroverted arenas, because I believe we introverts dominate in all of them, as long as we stop trying to copy the extroverts.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to something that you said in the beginning of that answer, which was about trying to force yourself to be an extrovert. And this is something we were talking about before we started recording too. And I think one of the reasons that I resonated so much with your book and what you do is I was really, at the time that I found your book, was really in a space of I'd spent so much time and money and energy trying to force myself to do it a certain way, right? There's one way to grow your business, according to Susie, the expert, who you paid $10,000 to, so she better be right. And I'm trying to do it the way that she says to do it, and it's not working for me, and it's working for all of these other people. And so then I'm like, well, what the heck is wrong with me? Well, nothing's wrong with me necessarily, but I am an introvert. I do have ADHD. I am not a morning person. Like, there's all of these things that we think, or at least I thought in the beginning, was like mandatory qualities of a successful entrepreneur, right? You have to be A, B, C, and D. And I wasn't any of those things. And I was trying so hard to force myself to be those things. And what really made a huge difference in my success, and your book was a part of this, was realizing there are actually a lot of ways to do it. And one way is not necessarily better than the other, but there is a way that is better for me to do it. And so can you talk a little bit about, when it comes to networking specifically for business owners, how do we find the way that is best for us?
I learned a lot of what I did from watching YouTube videos. And, for me, I taught myself how to sell by literally, after 93 doors of rejection, finding YouTube videos that showed me that sales was a system, and then going to work learning that system. When I moved to the United States, I really had to start again. I spent a lifetime awkwardly fostering a network in Australia, but when I came here, I wanted to do something different, and also I didn't know a soul. And what I found is that the best education that I could find on networking was to do an elevator pitch. Now, for those people that don't know what I'm talking about by that, it's I do this for this group of people, even if. It's the most transactional, icky, contrived thing you could possibly ever say, which is why no introvert ever does that. So now, don't get me wrong, a lot of extroverts and the occasional introvert will do it. And it's like them walking around going, do you want to buy from me? No, what about you? What about you? It feels uncomfortable, which is why most people do what I call aimless networking, which is where they walk around and having these really shallow conversations, especially we introverts, because we feel uncomfortable with small talk. But then when somebody asks us what we do, because it feels so transactional again, we kind of say, well, my day job is this. And who wants to buy off someone that kind of structures their dialogue like this? So there are two things that I recommend that people need. Well, I recommend we first need to recognize that while a prospect being in that room is helpful, because especially if we're trying to keep the lights on to our business, that's absolutely vital. But the truth is, the key out of the hamster wheel, and my whole framing is I want to show people how to master the networking room so they never have to go back to one. And I know, Melissa, we were talking about this offline, that people think you and I are going to networking events all the time. And we're not. The fact is, we've built our network to a point where networks chase us. And how that happened is, in the process of networking, we discovered what I call momentum partners and champions. Momentum partners are the people that believe in and inspired by your work. And by the way, that's not going to happen if you're using an elevator pitch. And believe in your work enough that they're going to introduce you to people, open doors for you, whether it's a podcast interview, a introduction to an association, something that's meaningful to you. Now, the thing I will say is a good momentum partnership isn't transactional. It's not like a balance sheet where I say, oh, Melissa, I gave you those 3 introductions, so I'm expecting 2 more, 3 more by the end of close of business today. How stressful that must be. It's a balanced belief in each other. So I would do that for you. You would do that for me. And then you've got the group of champions. And champions are the people, they're the reason why you get paid well for what you do. For instance, Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, the world's largest networking group in the world, has endorsed my work. There are so many other amazing people that have endorsed my work. And because of that, my work has a lot more credibility, and therefore I'm able to charge more. Now, Ivan's also had me on his podcast. I've spoke at the national convention for BNI and all of these other events, thanks to a lot of champions and momentum partners that have given my work credibility and opened doors for me. So really, when I go networking, a relief for an introvert is learning they don't actually need to go in even looking for clients, which removes the transactional nature altogether. The next thing is, though, that I find that a lot of introverts, they feel like their job, which feels terrible, is to explain what they do. How does that not sound transactional? And the elevator pitch, if you're going to explain what you do, is about the best you get. For me, I believe that people don't care what you do until they see that you care. So I look at expressing networking from a place of genuine care for a difference I want to make in the world. So if I followed a general elevator pitch, it would be something like, I help introverted service providers or obtain more closed business, even if they think they're terrible at sales, something horrible like that. But for me, when I'm asked what I do in a networking room, well, firstly, I lead with what I call a unified message. And the reason I do this is because if I say I'm a sales trainer, everybody looks at me like I'm one step above a scam artist. So that is not a great direction. But if I say I'm in marketing, somebody says, oh, that's great, I need marketing. How much do you cost? Now I'm talking about price. I just met them. Or they say, oh, I've already got help in marketing. And now I'm like, oh, I'm different. I've got magic ruby slippers. None of that works. So what I do is I use what's called a unified message, which is a 1, 2, or 3 word statement that doesn't fit anyone else but me and fits me very authentically. For instance, I call myself the rapid growth guy. That breaks somebody's brain, usually because I am being interested before I try to be interesting. And then people need to solve puzzles to work out what it is at first before they include it or exclude it from what they actually want or need. And our brain must solve the puzzles. So because of that, they say, what exactly is that? And I can then respond with, thanks for asking. One of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. You heard me say it the moment I got on this podcast. But what I find is, and I just hate seeing it. And then I explain the other piece. And that's why I'm on a mission too. Of course, I say in between, do you know anyone like that? Well, I'm on a mission too. Now, the reason why I use that dialogue is the difference is I didn't even tell you what I do. I didn't mention sales training. I didn't mention marketing coaching, nothing at all. All I did was express my genuine care and interest in serving the world in a certain way. And when they highlight they are like that, and then I articulate my mission, I can then move into a story of someone just like them that wanted what they wanted and how I got them to an amazing result. Now, when I say a story, I do not mean a testimonial or a case study. Those are humble brags, and you're going to feel terrible saying those. I mean stories that actually motivate and inspire people to take action that's in their best interest, whether they use you or not. Hopefully, they believe they can do it themselves, but maybe they want to use you anyway because you inspired them to do so. So everything that I see networking as is this non-transactional, non-one-sided sales pitch. It's a genuine connection where I get to share what I care about, and what I care about is serving them.
I love all of that. I feel like that was like 10 different podcast episodes that we could do. I don't even know where to go with this. So I want to ask you a question because I actually just posted something about this on Instagram last night. When you talk about this 1, 2, or 3 word phrase that you use, one of the things that I say a lot when it comes to introducing yourself at networking events is that being clear is better than being clever. Because I always see people get up and they think that they're being very like mysterious and intriguing and look at me, I'm different than all of the other people who sell skincare because I said that I help people age backwards, right? Or something like that. And I'm like, now everyone's very confused. They don't know what you do. Like, do you sell hormone replacement therapy? Do you do Botox? Like, how are you helping me age backwards? So how do you make sure that that phrase that you're using is still attention getting and conveys what you want it to, but isn't so like vague and broad and confusing that people are like, that guy's weird. I don't even want to talk to him.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they hear unified message and they think slogan. And a slogan is not what I'm talking about. So if you had never heard of a business coach before, the first time you heard somebody say, I'm a business coach, you would say, what exactly is that? Mm-hmm. What I'm highlighting is you need to create a version of I'm a business coach for you. Like I say, I'm the rapid growth guy, not a slogan, but something that leads people to say, what exactly is that? And the reason being is I'm not trying to be vague to get people to lean in and say, what is that? So I can then talk to them about the functional of what I do. What I'm trying to do is highlight that I'm different to everybody else. And I want everybody to really internalize that you are different. Now, it's funny, the number of people that come up to me after one of my presentations from stage and say, but Matt, I'm not different. I'm exactly like everyone else. I do the same services. And I'm like, you've got unique past experiences, unique past customers, unique upbringing. You've read different books. You failed different tests that cause you to do different things. That is just not true. And by the way, anybody questioning this, here's what I want you to think about for a second. Imagine if I said, oh, guys, I really want to introduce you to Melissa. She does everything exactly like everyone else. Think about how many people I would get referred or even be open to those introductions. So if you've ever got a referral, if you've ever got repeat business, then you need to know there is something different. If you don't know what that is, then you need to call your customers. By the way, your customers know that they're paying you a premium. They could get it cheaper. So don't be afraid to say, and by the way, don't be afraid to blame me and say, I'm working with a coach and they told me that there's something unique and different about what I do. And they told me to think about my best customers. And by the way, that's you. So firstly, thank you for that. Appreciate them. And then say, but what I need to understand is what is it about what I do that you provide, that you see, as a great service? Why is it that you write me such great testimonials, or why is it you refer me to people? And I promise you that people will say you provide amazing customer service and you're really knowledgeable. By the way, those two answers are not useful. And the reason why they're not useful is nobody's going to say, oh, you should hire me, Melissa. I am the world's worst at customer service and I really don't know much, right? So because of that, we can't use them. So what you need to do is appreciate them for saying that and saying, thank you so much for sharing that. What specifically about my knowledgeability have you found most useful? And then all of a sudden you'll get a treasure trove of information. By calling myself the rapid growth guy, people don't put me in a sales box where they think I'm scammy. They don't put me in a marketing box where they think I do Facebook ads, which I don't. And people put me in this box of what's the rapid growth guy? And for the first time, instead of shoving something down someone's throat they didn't ask for, they genuinely ask. And as soon as I learn to articulate that successfully, I can then do that online, not by taking photos of my dog or donut for something to say, but because my message is so concise, it breaks through the noise, which means I don't have to work very hard to get people to chase me.
So essentially what you're saying, I love what you said about how that phrase is different than a motto or a slogan, right? That's a big difference. And then also having that clarity on what your unique passion is, what your unique mission is. One of the things that I hear you say a lot is, focusing on what is your value. And when you introduce yourself, not necessarily telling people like, hi, I'm Matt, this is what I do, but this is the value of what I do, which I think is a big distinction too.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I say, firstly, I never want to tell people what I do because firstly, people don't care. The second thing is if I say, here's why you should value what I do, people have to agree or disagree with that. And that's a logical mind process. And that's a problem also. People want to know that I care about them. That's it. So if you think about Wendy, she wants to convey her passion and mission to help people going to China. For me, I want to convey my mission and passion for helping introverts. So what I look at is I use a unified message. I'm the rapid growth guy to trigger someone to say, what exactly is that? And by the way, the rapid growth guy is inherently me more than sales trainer or marketing coach could ever be. I mean, I'm a business coach. I'm a branding expert, social media strategist, a master in neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a business, I'm so many things. Truthfully, the only thing I know is that people don't care about any of that. They don't care how hard it was for me to learn those things or how long it took me to learn them. But when I say the rapid growth guy, it gets me heard in the crowded marketplace. It gets people to say, what exactly is that? Because they're genuinely interested. And I feel genuine saying it because it articulates who I am better than I ever could in any other way by using a functional jargon word that they know because they anchor to it. And they're like, oh, that's all you are. That's like reading The Introvert's Edge and saying, I'm the Introvert's Edge person. That's ridiculous. So once I've said that, then they ask me what exactly that is. And I will then respond with my passion and mission to help them. I'm not telling them what I do or even the results I get. I'm just telling them that I want them to know that I care and I understand where they're struggling. Right? I want to show them that I know them well. That's why I'm on their side. And then once I say, well, I'm on a mission to help people like you realize you really can obtain rapid growth doing what you love, just not by getting better at your functional skill. Instead, 3 things outside the scope of that. that really allow you to obtain rapid growth in a business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around, I will then segue into a story. Now, here's the reason why I tell a story. Now, testimonials don't do this. Case studies don't do this. Throw those out. You shouldn't be using them with customers. And I know that's going to be against everything you've ever heard before, but especially an introvert, we are not going to want to say those things. Here's the thing about storytelling. When you tell a story, first thing is it activates the reticular activating system of a person's brain. What that means is it actually creates artificial rapport. And now we introverts are terrible at creating initial rapport, but we're great at fostering deep rapport. So I use storytelling as a way of generating that initial rapport because I hate small talk. Now, the great thing about this is extroverts are great at doing that initial rapport. They're terrible at deep rapport, and storytelling actually fosters deeper rapport than even that superficial small talk does. The second thing about storytelling, which is great, is people remember up to 22 times more information when embedded into a story. And we introverts love educating customers. And when we tell a story, we're trying to be mindful of someone's time, so we glide through it, but then we are happy to hit them with jargon for the next 20 minutes. It's insane. So people remember more when embedded into a story, but the most important thing is when you tell a story, it short circuits the logical brain and you speak directly to the emotional brain. The logical brain is the part of the brain that's saying, that'll work for me, that won't work for me, my situation's different, hang up the phone or let me interrupt. When you start telling a story, the emotional brain literally short circuits the logical brain. And it goes story time, and it just listens to every part of the story, assuming that it's factual. Duty of care here, only real stories, please. And then when you get to the end of the story, if the moral of the story is, so as you can see, this person had that same problem you did, and this epiphany, this thing that they were able to discover, and I always like to say they discovered it, people are going to assume you helped them do it, allow them to get to this result. So that's why they should do that thing. People are like, oh my gosh, I want that. And because you've told it in the story, it's been tangible. It's like they tried it on. Now they don't want to give it back. And that's why they lean forward and they're like, well, what does working with you look like? Again, only if it's a prospect, right? What we're really hoping for is a momentum partner and a champion. But let me be clear, when they say that, if you answer that question in that networking room, you've just done the worst thing possible because A, they're going to resent you answering it. You will get interrupted and you are going to feel terrible about pitching somebody in the middle of a networking room. So don't do it. We all have phones in our pockets these days and tell them now's not really a great time to do that. Pull out your phone and schedule a time to do a Zoom session or catch up for a coffee. But if you think about networking as that way, the only time you tell people what you do is in the story. And the story gets them to try it on, not get educated, which is why they'll engage with it. And more importantly, they'll understand the impressive value of what you provide. And again, you all provide unique, impressive value.
And what you're talking about too is a lot of the balance between being authentic while you're networking, but also being intentional about it. And that's something I talk about a lot because I think people get really good at the authenticity, which they take as like, I'll just show up and be me. Like, I don't have a plan. I'll just talk and do what I want and be me. And then intentionality, we think that's when we get into the, what I call the salesy weirdos, right? Like that, because we're there with an agenda and we're there with a plan and our goal is to get 10 business cards tonight, or our goal is to set up 2 coffee chats after this. And there's a balance between being authentic, being real, being yourself, and also having some intention behind what you're doing in networking too. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about when it comes to how you're talking to people about what you do and how you help people, is finding that balance between the two.
I think one of the things, and I want to go back to that intentionality, because I think that's a really important comment. So firstly, a lot of people will say, well, but I don't know who I'm talking to. And because of that, I can't say, like, for instance, if I walked up to somebody and they said, I'm passionate about helping an introverted service provider. And they're like, oh, I work for a global hardware company. Well, what am I going to do with you now? Right? So now I've got a problem. Well, actually, I don't, because my bet is if I share my passion and mission for servicing introverted service providers, they have a friend or a family member that is an introverted service provider. The second thing is that I can't articulate my passion and mission for servicing everyone in general because it's too general a statement. So the problem is that by going broad, I'm speaking to nobody. So what I do is I talk about my passion for helping introverted service providers. And the number of times somebody says, I actually work for X, Y, and Z billion-dollar cloud company. We're not service providers, but I love your passion and I'd love to introduce you to so-and-so. because nobody's passionate in networking rooms. They're all so vanilla. So the moment they experience passion, they're like, oh my gosh, I want to steal this for myself. Now let's talk about preparation, because for me, I always plan what I'm going to say, and I say the same thing every time. But to the person that I'm talking to, it sounds like an authentic and organic conversation, mainly because, and by the way, I get that most people have had phone calls from telemarketers that sound scripted and they don't want to sound that way. But think about your favorite movie. Think about the character in that movie, your favorite character. Realize they're also reading a script. The difference between those two people is just practice. However, there's one thing you can do differently, and that is I never go to a networking room in a way that feels anything else but a bunch of preset meetings. What do I mean by that? Any event, like a conference, usually has a conference app where all the people in attendance are going to be on it. If you're talking about a meetup group, well, usually people connect with their Facebook or their LinkedIn. And because of that, you can find out who's going in advance. If you can't find it through that, look at the last month's event, look at the photo of the people that were in the event when they did a couple of photos, and look for who was tagged in the photos, and then connect with them in advance and say something like, I'm thinking about going to this networking event and I'm really passionate about X. Is this a good place to come to? And as a byproduct of that, they're like, yeah, absolutely, you should totally come. Now, if they're extroverted, they're like, well, you know what? I'll introduce you to a whole bunch of people. If they're an introvert, they're like, thank goodness, somebody I'm going to be that's a familiar face. The moment I walk into that room, often I don't have time to meet anybody outside the square because I've already got people that are expecting to talk to me. They're not only expecting to talk to me, they've probably already seen a whole bunch of my stuff. And as a byproduct, I don't even have to work very hard. So being contrived about who to speak to means that you can make sure you're always having the right conversations with the right people.
Yeah. Having the right conversations with the right people, that doesn't mean the conversation is inauthentic.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's even more authentic. So the thing that I find is what often leads to inauthentic marketing or inauthentic networking, because it's basically the same thing, is that people don't think about how to best show up. Because for me, I don't want to wing things every time. I don't want to bend myself to someone else's needs and wants because that's inauthentic. I want to genuinely say, here is the people I show up for every day. I want to genuinely tell a story that is actually helpful to them. And before I get to any of that, I want to genuinely offer introductions and suggestions and value to that other person. And for those people that are like, well, I'm not like you, I don't have millions of people in my network and all these high-level people to introduce to. I bet if everybody went and connected with everybody they knew on LinkedIn or went and surveyed the people that they knew on LinkedIn, you'd quickly realize you've got a whole bunch of friends with podcasts and everybody wants a great guest on their podcast that isn't going to sell the audience, but actually deliver something of value. Everybody's looking for the right type of guest, not the 100 of spam messages that we get all the time. Usually, people that are on association boards. What usually happens is people haven't mapped their network, so they have nothing of value to offer the person they're speaking to. That's just laziness. So what you need to do is you need to map your network. You need to think about the people that you can offer introductions to that are also helpful to them, right? And then you can go and have these fruitful conversations where you genuinely are not saying a contrived script, but presenting the best version of yourself. A planned and prepared one, sure, but you're customizing it to their unique situation, only slightly, because you don't want to change who you are for anyone, because that is inauthentic. And just so everyone's aware, if this sounds like a lot of work, it's a lot more work to go to a whole bunch of networking events where sure, you walk out with 10 cards, but we all know what we do with those 10 cards. We stack them on the desk next to the last 10 cards that didn't call or we had no contact with. It's a lot more work to go out and do proposals for people that don't buy. And if you're talking about mental anxiety stress, it's a lot more work to go to a networking room and not know who's going to be in there. And the emotional recovery of that is a lot more effort than going to a meetup page and seeing who's going in advance and going, that person, and that person. Yes, 15 networking events to run into them by chance, if you're lucky, as opposed to going, wow, these 3 people's profiles look interesting. I'll connect with them in advance. And, by the way, don't be afraid to say that you're introverted when you're in conversation when you're talking to them. Because if they say, yes, me too, you just got a buddy for life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a perk of doing that preparation too is, and this is something I hear a lot from the introverts that I work with, is how do I skip the small talk? How do I not have to have small talk with people when I'm networking, but not jump straight to the so tell me about the biggest trauma of your life, right? We need to feel like we can be somewhere in between. And when you have done that preparation work and that stuff, it I think it makes it easier to skip a lot of that small talk, because I don't need to ask you like, oh, are you married? Do you have kids? Where are you from? Colorado? Like, clearly you're not from Colorado, but are you from Colorado? What do you do? How long have you been in business? I already know all those things. So we can skip that and get to like, why are you passionate about what you do? What do you value most? What's your mission with your business? And things like that allow us to get to know each other on a different level.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody wants to talk about themselves in a non-superficial way, and everybody hates the superficial stuff. And they appreciate you sharing in a different way and having different conversations with them. I mean, there's no one that's going to say they don't want to do that. One thing I do want to highlight is when you control a networking dialogue, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't actually tell people what I do. Like when they ask me what I do, I start asking them questions. I'm like, oh, that's great. Everybody wants an interrogation when they first meet you. Like you've got to realize that you have to open the door to these more important dialogues. And what's really interesting is what I find is the moment you use a unit, give value, give introductions, even just listening and being excited for them and providing them suggestions that may not even land for them, they will go, wow, this is different. And then when they ask you what you do, when they feel your passion and mission, not your feature and function or sales pitch, and then they hear through the story something that actually applies to them, they'll tell you anything you want to know. The thing that you need to realize, though, is you don't need to know any of that. If you know your niche and they've responded, you should know all the answers already. Because, I mean, I know my niche better than they know themselves. Which means that if I say, now, look, I appreciate you want to talk further about what I do. We're all at a networking event right now. I'm just, I feel like we're all trying to meet new people. And also, I really want to understand a little bit more about what you do before I suggest that I may or may not be able to help you. So why don't we set, we've all got our phones with us. Why don't we set a calendar invitation? I'll organize a Zoom call with you. And I set it right there and then. Because I want to ask those deep and penetrating questions, but I want to do it when I'm sitting with them one-on-one where they feel a little bit more comfortable. They already have decided that they like me. So I can ask those questions or I can just leave it at that. Now, one of the things that I will say is once I book that calendar invitation is I will often say to them, look, Melissa, I have to admit, I'm loving this conversation. And as an introvert myself, it's far easier for me to continue talking to you than talking to everyone, going to talk to someone else. But I have to admit, I know you're probably at a networking event to meet people the same as I am. So don't feel obligated to hang with me. And we've got a wonderful conversation coming up. So feel free, if there's other people you want to meet, you're welcome to do so. One of two things will happen. They'll go, no, Matthew, I'm actually really enjoying this conversation. And that happens all the time. By the way, I'm an introvert too, so this feels great. And then later I'll make it a joke about how we have to both push ourselves to go and talk to new people. And now I'm doing them a favor and me a favor. Or they'll say, you know what, that's actually great. Because they don't want a sales pitch right now, but they did ask for one later. That's amazing. So move on.
Yeah. This is such good information. And I love that you are not only teaching us things, but also giving us some actionable advice that we can put into practice right now. That's going to make us so much better at talking about what we do and connecting with people and not wasting so much time when we're networking. So I do want to wrap it up, even though I feel like we could keep going for another 3 hours. If people want to know more about you, if they want to learn more about what you do, obviously they can check out your book, which is amazing. I tell them that all the time, but how else can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I always suggest is, first thing, help yourself. So I would suggest the best way to take action on this is to get somebody else that doesn't have your same functional skill to listen to this podcast. And then go to matthewpollard.com/growth. And there you'll get a 5-step template that will help you create your version of the Rapid Growth Guide, your unified message, and really find your niche of willing and wanting to buy clients. It's funny, I did this at the National Freelance Conference a couple of years ago. And at the end, I said, look, put your hand up if you now believe you've got a unified message that will excite and inspire, and you've identified a niche of people that will pay you what you're worth. 97% of the room put their hands up. The sad thing is I said, look, do me a favor, keep your hand up if this is the most time you've actively spent on your marketing since you started your business. And like 85% out of the room kept their hands up. So the template at matthewpollard.com/growth will actually give you the framework to get to the outcome. And it works if you spend the time doing it. You've totally plugged my Introverts Edge to Networking book a bunch, which I appreciate. I think for the other people that struggle with sales, you can also go to theintrovertsedge.com to get my book on sales. Now, my publisher is going to hate me when I say this, but you do not need to buy my book. What I would suggest is if you go to theintrovertsedge.com and download the first chapter, that'll give you overwhelming evidence you can succeed in sales as an introvert. and it will map the full 7-step process. If you do nothing more than grab those step headlines and put what you currently say into it, you'll quickly realize that some things don't fit. Throw that out. You shouldn't be saying it to customers. Then you'll realize there's some things out of order, fix that, and then fill the gaping holes. If you do nothing more than that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. And as I said, you can get that at theintrovertsedge.com. If you get stuck on anything, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an audio message. And for those people that don't know that you can send audio messages, you can do it on your iPhone or your Android phone. Can't do it on a PC. It's the most wonderful sales tool to re-engage people these days. Send me an audio message. If you can't figure it out, send me an actual message. And I would be delighted to answer your questions, because the last thing I want somebody to do is hear this podcast interview and go, that's great, I'm now inspired as an introvert. Because if you don't put the tactics to work, then I haven't helped you. All I've done is inspired you to feel like you can, but still not do it. And that's not the path that I want to go.
Yes, fabulous. Those are great resources. I will link all of those in the show notes so everybody can go grab those. And thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been amazing.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of Powerful Women Rising. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you love the podcast, make sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, write a review, or buy us a coffee. Your support helps more women like you step into their power and grow their businesses in a way that feels real and true to them. Want to keep the party going? Check out the show notes for details on our next virtual speed networking event, or join us in the Powerful Women Rising community. Until next time, remember that building a business your way is the best way.